everyone. Thank you for joining our next edition of the GEMA Talks vidcast series. I'm excited to introduce our guest today, Kay Madati. Kay is a proud Georgetown Hoya who graduated in 1995 and has had a illustrious career, a ton of it in the media space. I know he spent a lot of years in his early years at BMW and worked a lot in the marketing, corporate marketing world. Has done a great deal in the content world, and will have some really interesting perspectives for us to share. Most recently, he was a senior executive at Twitter, overseeing all of their content, and we'll obviously have some thoughts on Twitter during this time. So I want to say hello to Kay Madati. Kay, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Rich.
Great. Thanks for being with us. I want to start by asking where you are. I don't think you're in Greece, but where are you? You're in Los Angeles, I presume?
I am in LA. I wish I was in Greece.
Yes.
Doing fine, family safe, abiding by the mayor's orders. Things are not too bad.
Yeah, it looks like LA, I mean, certainly California, it feels like we're getting a little teeny bit of light at the end of the tunnel here.
Yeah. I'm hopeful. I don't know what that means with people getting back to semi-regular life, but we're heading in the right direction.
Right. Well, you've worked, over the last number of years, you've been working deep in the digital media world, and would be really interested to hear your perspective on, with the crisis now, sort of what are some of the major themes you've seen in terms of how it's affected the industry in specific ways.
Yeah. I think like every industry, stopping business and having employees work from home has been a transition period for the digital media industry. I'll start with the positives, and then I'll flip. I think I've been reading a bunch of trade magazines and news articles that ironically, or maybe not so ironically, not surprisingly, digital consumption is up.
Right.
Time spent on websites is up. Mobile traffic is up. Television linear ratings are up. Like all of the metrics, all of the key things that drive the business are up from the consumer consumption side.
Right.
And that's not surprising. People are spending more time at home. I mean, even Zoom is up something like 260% versus the month prior. So that all is positive, I think, as people get accustomed to using new tools and new ways to actually conduct business, to bring entertainment into the house, to communicate and stay connected with families and friends. So those are the positive trends. On the negative side, the advertising business has not caught up with those trends, particularly digital advertising, which is ironic, but it also could be the whole country or the whole industry adjusting to how you work in this day in business. If you can't go out and shoot commercials, it may be hard to get commercials up in the air. If you can't, if your whole marketing team is now scattered in their homes, it may be a bit harder to actually plan those marketing strategies and plan those media buys and so on and so forth. But digital advertising is down significantly, which is odd because usually revenue is a lagging indicator of the key metrics that drive some of those companies. So when Facebook posts higher daily active users, their advertising revenue follows. Right. I don't know how long we're going to be in our homes as opposed to working, going back to a semi-normal working schedule. I'd hope that by June or July that we were semi back to that, but we might also, I'm hopeful that we might also see a correction in the places that advertisers want to spend their money to get in front of all of these eyeballs that are on all of these different platforms.
Right. You've obviously worked for or worked very closely with digital publishers. for many, many years. In your roles back at Facebook, and you worked at CNN and BET, and obviously Twitter. Um, how do you see digital publishers navigating through this obviously challenging time when obviously advertising is way down? Obviously commerce is way down, so advertising is way down. Do you see them getting through this? Will there actually be some folks who don't make it through?
Yeah. I'll start with the platform companies, especially the two that I worked at, Twitter and Facebook. Um, uh, uh, Twitter and Facebook actually have been pretty aggressive for many, many years. I mean, maybe a decade, at encouraging people to work how they want to work, to really personalize and allow people to structure a work week in the ways that they need to be able to do their best work. And that means accommodating single parents or people who have to work from home from time to time, and so on and so forth. I know on my team at Twitter, we had a great flexibility about where you work, when you work, particularly because a lot of my team had global responsibilities and had crazy hours. Like having to be in the physical office wasn't always 100% necessary, and you had the tools and access to the systems and the tools to be able to do it well. So I think on some levels, the platform companies who work like this have already encouraged a culture inside their companies that allow people to personalize their own work time and workspace, better positioned to take advantage of this. In fact, when I talk to some of my ex-colleagues at any of these companies, they're working hard. They're working long days.
Right.
And in some cases, they're working longer days. They find that now everyone knows where you are, you're more accessible. And there's this expectation that you'll be able to answer the phone calls or jump on a conference call right away because you're going to be right in front of your computer instead of running around to meetings.
Right.
So I think those companies are well positioned. On the digital publisher side, I have less visibility into it, but I think that they're going to have a hard time. I just think about how much the current environment has changed how creative production even happens, if it's happening at all. Like the ability to go out and shoot content, edit content, even pulling people into a room where you can have debates about how a storyline may flow or not flow, access to the Avid systems. And a lot of production companies have been rushing to try to get their cloud access as opposed to physical access to their activities. So I think while maybe the business infrastructures around some of these companies can be done remotely, the transition to doing some of the actual hands-on work that needs to happen to be able to get the content up on whatever platforms that you need to, I think that those guys are going to have a little bit more of a transition.
Specific to Twitter, where you spent several years, how do you think they're faring through this? I certainly know my Twitter usage is up. Again, obviously, I've got to believe on the advertising side they've been challenged. But overall, how do you, if you were put yourself back into that company right now, how do you think they're thinking about this situation right now and navigating through it?
My bet is, and I will know soon enough because earnings will be in a couple of weeks, I think. My bet is that the usage on the platform is increasing. They were already on a trend where they were having double-digit user growth, literally for the last 8 quarters. So I don't think that has slowed down. In fact, in this period of time, I bet that it has jumped up. Where I think the focus is going to be is how we get the advertising business back up on its feet, and how we work with some of our partners who still have messages to get out across the platform in front of the user base, how they work more closely. I bet you that there's an inordinate amount of focus on that. And considering, particularly because I ran the content team where we had deals around the Olympics,
right, that's a great point. Yeah.
All sporting activity. We had MLB, PGA, NBA, like all of that is gone.
Wow, yeah, that is a big issue.
And on top of that, and then you actually think about some of the other things. We had content deals with major media companies that produced award shows and after shows behind television shows that may or may not be in production now or may not have content up right now. So there's a large swath of the content business that has been disrupted just because a lot of this content isn't being produced or the events are being canceled and so on and so forth. Olympics was going to be a huge thing for us. We struck 4 global deals across the world with 4 different big media companies and rights holders. And to have that now move to, I think, 2021 is a big deal.
And you must have had associated ad revenue attached to those as well.
There most definitely were expectations, I'm sure. So, I mean, back to answering your question as directly as I can, I think the focus is particularly for the sales organizations at some of these companies. Carolyn Everson at Facebook gave an interview to Ad Age, noting exactly the same thing, that they're focused on trying to be as supportive as possible to their advertisers and to help them in whatever ways they can. I also think that particularly those 2 companies, and maybe YouTube as well, have to be working overtime trying to figure out how they manage disinformation across the platforms. With regard to the virus and cures and impact and all of that stuff. So I bet the engineers, I bet some teams are really working really, really hard.
Well, Twitter seems like they've made some real stands on that. Misinformation.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jack made a bold move. Jack and the executive team, I think we all were involved in weighing in on this. Made a bold move last year about political advertising and health, meaning the ability for users to have healthy conversations on the platform, has been a big priority for the company. And as Jack puts it, if we don't actually make strides in this area, we won't have a business to actually do anything with in the future. So this is, I think Twitter has taken it pretty seriously. I think Facebook has too, but that's, I'm not too close to be able to opine on that. All of these companies are taking it more seriously than they did 5 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. What about, just speaking more largely across the sort of digital media and tech world, maybe stepping outside of the current crisis for a little bit, how do you see the unbelievable changes we've seen in the entertainment media space with the large tech companies coming in and either acquiring or partnering or creating their own businesses? What do you see out there in the landscape when you think about, for instance, the streaming wars, and you've got these major behemoths from the tech world coming in, and you still got the major studios doing their thing and trying to compete? What's your general overall thoughts when you look at that whole dynamic?
Yeah, ask me a question.
You got about 5 hours.
Yeah, to be the oracle of the industry.
We're going to record every word.
I'd have one of those big jobs if I had the right answers to them. There's so much going on. I have been in and around this business for now 25 years. And I have never seen as much transition as there is here. Everything from acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions, where being bigger is reportedly supposedly be more competitive. You talk about Disney Fox, you talk about Viacom CBS, and the implications there. And then the streamers or the platform companies, let's call them, Netflix, Hulu, Facebook and Snapchat, Twitter, Amazon, right? Apple TV. All of them stepping into the space in different ways and different levels of aggressiveness. This is like a very interesting time to be in media and consumption habits. I don't know what the answers are going to be. I think streaming is not going away. What might have started as another way for traditional media companies to allow users or audience members to actually connect with their content has now become critical to their future. And so I think a lot of these moves in and around direct to consumer subscription services or ad supported services like Peacock, that is supposed to launch in April, Quibi that launched a couple days ago. All of these plays are tapping into, maybe something some may argue late for some of the traditional companies, into how you connect your content to people directly and then monetize against it. I think I'm not too far out on a ledge to be able to say that the platform companies have a head start on this. They've grown enormous amounts of users. And when you even look at some of the projected growth that a Disney Plus or some of the other ones that have actually been public about what they want to do in the space, it's a small percentage of what maybe a Netflix, who's been doing this for, I don't know, a decade,
Right.
who already have subscribers on it. So I'm not suggesting that it's an impossible task, but it certainly is a catch-up game for some people who are going to direct to consumer some of these offerings. I think from the consumer perspective, there's a lot of options for us. I begrudgingly in this time finally signed up for an ad-free Hulu, and that now makes, I don't know, I've got kids YouTube, I've got
Netflix,
Netflix,
Plus, or Disney Plus.
Apple Plus, Disney Plus.
Right.
That's a lot.
Well, I think it's part of the reason why Peacock went with ad supported. Is I think there may be fatigue on that end, and advertisers need to find new places to spend money, and Peacock will be one of the few streaming alternatives. The fact that when you did the uptake on Hulu so that you don't have to see ads anymore, and that must be just making advertisers crazy.
It must, and so that's why the looking glass into the future, nobody has it. I think what piques my interest is in terms of opportunities to add value in the industry is being aggressive about like how you actually get consumers to sign up for these things. What the platforms look like, what's the product infrastructure around it, and then how you layer business models around it. I mean, that's what's exciting about this time. Like, it may mean that some of these companies look very, very differently, work very, very differently, approach the business challenges in different ways. I've always had what I felt is like a unique position in the industry, is that this is not about the disruptors versus the disrupted, traditional media companies versus the new age media companies. I think that somewhere in the middle of this is that they both have what the other one needs, whether it's the greatest content in the world meets the most eyeballs in the world, and what does that partnership or business, or in some cases acquisition, look like. I mean, there's no accident that Pluto TV was bought. I think, was it another company bought another similar competitor?
Yeah, Fox just bought Tubi.
Right, that's exactly right. These are not accidents. So I think everyone's looking at how you bring where the eyeballs and the time is being spent together with how the content is created. I still think the traditional media companies are the best content producers in the world. They know how to tell story. They know how to tell narrative. They're very, very good at it. How they connect to the fact that, year over year, more and more people and more eyeballs are going to the platform world. Like that's the opportunity, and how those worlds come together. And I don't think that the answer is going to be enemies. It may be frenemies, but it's not going to be enemies.
Yeah. What about Facebook? Are you surprised they never have? I mean, I know they have Facebook Watch, which is, obviously not at the level of one of these major streaming players. Do you think they'll ever change their mind and go big in that space? Or do you think they're happy with what they're doing now? Or what would your thinking generally be about that?
I think Facebook, in every step that they make, whether it's in the content space or other, is very purposeful about what they want to do. And on some levels, I'll call it experimentation. I'm sure internally it's an actual business strategy. In and around Facebook Watch is just beginning. Like this is really just the front start of it. I don't know whether they want to become a full-on content house, a digital competitor to a Netflix. But I do believe that the amount of video consumption that happens on the platform and the time spent married together present an ongoing business opportunity and consumer proposition as well.
Right.
People to engage in content in a seamless way to the Facebook experience. So my bet is that over the coming years that you'll see them be even more prescriptive and directive about which way they want to go. I think they're just getting started.
Yeah, that's right. Um, as at some point, as which we can't predict, this crisis will abate, and again, we don't know when that timeline is. But any sort of general thoughts or predictions about how there could be some long-term ramification to this, or any general predictions on how it could affect the industry? Is there going to be a new normal, do you think? How do you think about
that? I think, and this is not just about our industry, the smaller players in the space are going to have a really hard time getting through this period, particularly if it extends late into the summer.
Yeah.
I think it's just going to put some people out of business.
Yeah.
We're not going to be able to. I read another article that says a lot of these smaller content publishing websites are getting no advertising dollars at all,
Right.
Which is their lifeline. Social influencers who have massive audiences have seen their advertising revenue dry up completely. So I think in the smaller ends of the pyramids, where you're not a company who can afford to either take out a loan or increase your debt load or whatever it may be, this is going to crunch some people. And I think when we come out on the other end, you're just going to see less players on the table. I also think that that there will be a natural slimming and streamlining of some of these bigger businesses. I mean, it was already beginning to happen as some of these companies were merging and coming together as well.
Do you think there'll be an acceleration, perhaps?
I think you don't need as many people to do some of the work that you need. And
right.
While it's maybe a tough time, but coming out of the back end of this, particularly the public companies are going to have having to show a quick road back to recovery, and managing the expense load is going to be some tough decisions that they'll have to make.
I know that you serve on some boards, both nonprofits and I know a public company board. Talk a little bit about the public company board you're on and how you all have had to work as a board to manage through this crisis, because there are obviously some really important, vital issues that arise during this. I'm curious to get some of that.
I sit on the board of a company named Wingstop. We are a chicken wing franchise distributed across the world, mostly heavily penetrated in the US, but we have owners and franchises all over the world. When this hit, the hospitality business and the restaurant business got hit very hard. We as a board, I think I am on 2 or 3 board calls a week for the last 6 weeks. So we have ramped up how often the board gets together with the executive management team. I hear from my CEO even more frequently than that. And we have been proactive at talking and holding Zoom conference calls, as well as information through press releases and other communications directly with our employees, our franchisors, and our shareholders. It is amped up how close we are to business. We have begun to discuss the impact on our strategic plan, not just for this year, but for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. I mean, from a board perspective,
right.
You have to go back and take a look at what you put on paper and whether it's valid anymore, and whether or not the things that you've outlined in terms of growth, and that's before you talk about whether or not you're hitting the targets that you had set for yourself, just whether or not the focus, particularly from a crisis management perspective, is in the right place. So we've been pretty busy. I've been really proud of how the executive management team has come together and worked worked through this. We've gotten good accolades from our franchises who feel like they're being communicated to. We still have supply lines that we have to manage, like being able to try to get cleaning materials into stores, make sure our employees are safe, make sure that the community around us knows that we're open for the delivery, if not for dine-in. Like all of those types of different things have come to bear. So we've been pretty busy.
Right. It's an interesting perspective to share, because I think sometimes people forget how important the role of a board does become in these kind of crisis situations, and the leadership and the CEO leadership, how important that becomes during these times.
Yeah, and let me tell you, I think our role as a board is to support, to challenge strategies, and then actually fundamentally, empower the executive management team. So I think the heavy lifting is done by the executive management team. I couldn't be more proud of our CEO and his leadership team and how they've approached this and really tackled it.
Great. One other issue related to the crisis, which I've been speaking to some of my other guests about, is a Georgetown related issue, which is kids who are graduating, seniors who are graduating right now, who are interviewing for jobs, juniors who've been interviewing for summer internships. It's a tough time for them, obviously, as they think about their future careers. Any advice for what they should be doing right now? Are there any opportunities out there? It seems like a lot of things have been frozen, but I don't know if you have any insights or anything to share there.
Yeah, I'll treat it from the tech company perspective.
Okay.
Usually the tech companies start thinking about summer internships as early as October and November of the previous year. And my bet is that a lot of those companies are not pulling back on those offers and those kinds of opportunities as they continue to look for candidates or have extended offers to some candidates for. The biggest piece of advice that I would give students today is be aggressive about this. Sit down, write your list, figure out who the entry points are and who the people are at those companies that you can contact or that you can send your information to, and continue to get your information and your value proposition in front of those companies. I think that inevitably, like, maybe they'll hire a few less interns than before, but you'll still need a pipeline of talent. You'll still want to get in front of some of these people and start thinking about what happens beyond the coronavirus. So don't automatically sit on your hands and say, oh, it's all closed up and dried up, there's nothing going on. I don't think that that's the case at all. I think it may be a little bit more competitive. And the ones who are more systematic and aggressive about staying on people's radar screens. I talked to a mentee a couple of weeks ago who had sent an email to somebody I'd connected them with, but had never followed up.
Right.
And had assumed that that person that I connected them with didn't respond because there was nothing to be had. It turned out that this is probably a pretty busy time for anybody who's working. And the proactive people who stay on people's radar screens in polite ways, not annoying.
Polite ways, right? To say, look, I know you're crazy. You may have missed this email, but just wanted to check in. Yeah.
Keep checking in. Sending an email is lightweight, and a follow-up, or even touching base and saying, hey, it's been a month and still interested, or I noticed that the company did X, Y, and Z, and really, I think that really shows some initiative, and that kind of initiative should probably be there whether there's coronavirus or not.
Right. Sure.
You should be that proactive and that systematic about like staying in touch with people, and eventually I got to believe that for smart kids with the right approach, who are thinking proactively about this stuff, that things will work out.
I also encourage young folks, if they have already, to tap into their Georgetown network. I think a Georgetown person is probably going to be more apt to want to respond to an email or help you because you're a fellow Hoya. And so don't be shy about reaching out to anyone in the Georgetown community for advice or, again, for connection.
I get unsolicited emails from Georgetown people or pings on LinkedIn, and I definitely, if people come in the correct way and in a thoughtful way, I try to do what I can.
Yeah, that's great. It's helpful, and that's a great example of LinkedIn's a great example of a place to try to do that reach out.
Yeah. Oh, and that actually,
Yeah.
to that actually, your LinkedIn should mirror your resume. I am awed at all levels of hiring. At LinkedIn is the first place that people go to understand who you are and what value you might have. So if that's just a couple of titles and time periods, you're not telling a great story.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. Let's pivot a bit. I know our users would enjoy hearing a little bit more about Kay Madati's journey. I mentioned at the top of the conversation what a really interesting career you've had since Georgetown. So if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about the arcs of your journey and maybe some key turning points or career breaks that you got, and maybe just some lessons people can take from
Yeah.
your career path.
I'm happy to. I will start by saying, I'd say my career may look linear, like it may look like it's all been planned out, but it hasn't. Half of it I'd like to say is luck and timing, and the other half is like gumption and energy and passion. Right out of college, right out of Georgetown, I was lucky enough to get a job at BMW. It was an interesting time for the company as they were building their first US-based factory. We're getting into the entertainment business through the James Bond film as a function market. And then we did a small project called BMW, well, not a small project, but a good project called BMW Films, which was, this is pre-YouTube times, which is hard to imagine.
It's one of the early ones that people remember.
Right. And I just happened to be at the company as a young person who was geeky about these technologies, who had the opportunity to work on all of those types of things. So I credit the business person that I am today to the training ground that I had at a world-class company like BMW. I worked all over the country, all over the world, and all over the company in a variety of different roles, from operations to sales to marketing, all of it. And my decade at the company was foundational in how I think about how to run a business and how to be aggressive and take chances and all of those types of things. From there, I had the opportunity I think for me, it was like you could either stay in the car business forever, or you could make a switch onto this technology thing. I actually didn't go directly into technology. I went straight to a sports marketing agency, one of the bigger ones in the world, Octagon. And I sat in their consultancy, the sports marketing consultancy group, helping brands leverage their footprints around NASCAR, tennis, soccer, World Cup, whatever it may be. I did that for about 2 years, and we had built a nascent digital practice inside of the agency, because we began to see how digital was beginning to impact even things like sports marketing. If you've ever been to the US Open in Flushing Meadows, you'll know that a lot of the activation around that sports property, particularly for brands like American Express, who does a phenomenal job, is tied to digital activations that allow you to have access to different perks in different areas and so on and so forth. So we were building that kind of infrastructure into the global sponsorship footprints around Olympics and World Cup and stuff like that. From there, I ended up at a small social networking company in Tribeca in New York, where I was the head of marketing. At a time when social marketing was big, platforms like Friendster still existed, and MySpace and Facebook was just beginning. And so I was knee deep in all of that work when CNN came a calling as they were beginning to realize that this was going to be a big part of their business in the future. And they offered me a job opportunity that moved me to Atlanta to their headquarters to run basically all of the social marketing and the digital platform engagement. And that was an interesting time because we were doing things like the YouTube debates,
I remember that, right?
which today sounds normal. The idea that you would take questions from regular people, but back then was revolutionary and controversial.
Is that in 08 or?
I'm sorry?
Was that in 2008 or?
Yeah, it was Obama running the first time.
Yeah, so 08.
Is that 08 or maybe further? Yeah, that's right. It's
yeah.
It might be further back actually, but anyway, see how old I am. I can't even remember. Yeah, so we got to work on a bunch of really interesting things. Partner with the Twitters and the Facebooks. We were one of the first networks to integrate Twitter data into our on-air coverage around issues, and using trends to actually identify what people in the world were talking about, and then building programming off of that for television and for digital platforms. So there's a good run there, and we had done a very, very big project with CNN around Obama's first inauguration. I mean, not with CNN, with Facebook, around his first inauguration, which to this day I think is the largest concurrent live streaming event ever.
Is that right?
On the internet, something like 225 million concurrent live streams.
Wow.
And we had done it with Facebook in conjunction together, the ability to actually watch, again, like this now happens on a regular basis, maybe not to that scale, but back then the idea that you would actually link a linear screen to the comments that people were making on a platform and put those online and on television for people to actually see how people were reacting to this in real time was a first. So we did that, and right after we had finished that, I got a call from Facebook asking me whether I would be interested in coming to work for them to do similar kinds of things.
You're working with the media companies at Facebook, right?
Yeah. So my job was
moved to Los Angeles for that.
I moved to Los Angeles for that. My job was to work with the media companies in particular and help them understand how you can integrate Facebook into their marketing and their content programming strategies. And we, at the time, I think there were 8 of us on the team. After 4 years at Facebook, I think we grew the team to 50 or 60 globally, and really watched the evolution and how Facebook could partner with a lot of these companies.
And again, at that time, this was pretty novel for the studios, right? A lot of them didn't even use Facebook, and were trying to understand how it meant.
Some of my favorite meetings with executives that will remain unnamed, where we're walking into these big C-suite offices and telling them this is what we could do for you, and then laughing us out of the room. Laughing us out of the room. I remember some very, very vivid conversations from people who are still running things in this town who thought this at the time postage stamp ads. I remember that's a direct quote. Postage could do nothing for him, and nobody was really on these platforms. So I think things have evolved from early days to now, where people have at least admitted that it's part of the communications and consumption matrix.
It's really fascinating to see how much.
Yeah, and then from Facebook to Viacom, where I think at this stage in my career, and I always tell young people, you think you know what you want to do. And for the first 10 years out of school, you think you are going to be very directed about it, but I think you discover it along the way. And I think by the time I got to Facebook, it became clear to me, like, this intersection of tech, innovation, and consumer experiences coming together in whatever fashion or format has been the thread that has really tied together most of my experiences since then. So
I am saying it, yeah.
Whether it's been on the traditional media side or whether it's been on the platform side, I have been at this intersection of those three things where consumers are doing different things on these platforms, and is there an opportunity to figure out how you can bring content and media to that in a way that makes a good consumer experiences, but also builds a business and makes money. My work at Viacom was actually being the chief digital officer for BET, and then subsequently working with Bob Backish, the current Viacom CEO, and his senior leadership team to figure out how Viacom could get more aggressive about being a digital first company. And then after 3 or 4 years there, I switched over to back to a platform company at Twitter to run their content team on a global basis there as well. So while I moved around a lot, to me, it's actually felt like I'm playing in the same space for at least the last 15 or 20 years, as it's evolved and moved forward.
Yeah, and we've had the chance to work together on some things, and I do think a hallmark of your career really has been innovation, and I know that that's an area that you need to work at a company that encourages and thrives on innovation, because it's an area that you excel in, and obviously I'm sure it's rewarding to see these places where you work, where innovation was sparked early on, and these are, like you said, these are now things that are common today, but at the time were quite innovative.
Yeah. Listen, I am super passionate about the media industry. I think it's one of the most exciting things that anybody coming out of college, coming out of Georgetown would want to think at. There's stuff to be learned at all levels through the food pipe, right up to the top, on a daily basis. I am a massive consumer of trade magazines and articles. I am always interested in like how people think about this space. And I think that we're in a period of time where the whole consumer behavior is going to be a massive sea shift. You asked me earlier on, what do I think is the trends for the future? I think one of them is going to be this continuing trend of how people are leveraging digital platforms to connect with what they want to connect with when they want to connect with. And I know that has huge implications on how the media and entertainment businesses run now. But the people who are going to actually win at the end of the game are ones who are actually planning for that change, as opposed to sitting on their hands and hoping that things stay the same. And I think most people now are planning in some way and fashion about it, but they also have entrenched businesses that they have to protect as much as they can while this transition happens. But people are moving to digital devices and digital connections. I look at my 10-year-old daughter, and she does not connect with content in the same way. I worked at Viacom, which owned Nickelodeon, and I asked her whether she wanted to go to the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards, and she didn't even know what it was. I mean, it's not. That's not.
She's on YouTube a lot.
Yeah, she's on YouTube a lot. That's not the kids brand she's connecting with, and so that brand has missed her completely. So you have to start thinking differently about how you get in front of young people and consumers in the future.
Well, Kay, I think that's a perfect place to end our conversation. And as usual, really enjoyed speaking with you, and wishing everyone safety and health in Los Angeles and your family. And we'll be in touch soon.
You're a kind man, Rich. This was fun, and can't wait to get the feedback, positive or negative.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing it. Really appreciate the time, Kay.
All right.
Take care.